Good afternoon and welcome to the National Press Club. My name is Teresa Warner and I'm the 105th president of the National Press Club. We are the world's leading professional organization for journalists, committed to our profession's future through our programming while fostering a free press worldwide. For more information about the National Press Club, please visit our website at www.press.org. To donate to our programs offered to the public through our National Press Club Journalism Institute, please visit www.press.org/institute. On behalf of our members worldwide, I'd like to welcome our speaker and those of you attending today's event. Our head table includes guests of our speaker, as well as working journalists who are club members. And if you hear applause from our audience, we'd note that members of the general public are attending, so it isn't necessarily a lack of journalistic objectivity. I'd also like to welcome our C-SPAN audience and our public radio audiences. Our luncheons are also featured on our member-produced weekly podcast from the National Press Club, available on iTunes. You can follow the action on Twitter using hashtag NPC Lunch. After our guest speech concludes, we'll have a question and answer segment, and I will ask as many questions as time permits. Now it's time to introduce our head table guest, and I'd ask each one of you to stand up briefly as your name is announced. From your right, Kate Michael, K Street Kate, Nia Hawkins, Associated Press, Todd Purdom, Vanity Fair, Mary Milliken, Reuters, Monica Hopkins, Eldorado Pictures, Nora Halpern, Americans for the Arts, Allison Fitzgerald, Freelance Journal and Speaker Committee Chair. I'm going to skip our speaker for just a moment. Robert Carden Communications and Speakers Committee member who organized this luncheon. Nina Oslu Tunjeli, American for the Arts. Mark Wino, Kiplingers. Nikki Schwab, Washington Examiner, Yeas and Nays columnist. Bob Madigan, WTOP. Pam Stevens, MSNBC. Our guest today is an award-winning actor, producer, director, and author. He has starred on the big screen, on television, and on Broadway. Alec Baldwin has won 2 Emmy Awards and a number of Screen Actor Guild Awards for playing the self-absorbed Jack Donaghy on the hit television show 30 Rock. He has hosted Saturday Night Live a record 16 times and is a well-known frequent flyer and American Airlines fan. A native of Long Island, Mr. Baldwin began his career in soap operas in the early 1980s before moving on to Broadway and films. His most notable films include The Hunt for Red October, The Aviator, Pearl Harbor, and It's Complicated. Mr. Baldwin is a member of the Americans for the Arts Artists Committee and serves as the 25th annual Nancy Hanks Lecturer on Arts and Public Policy. He is in Washington this week working with the committee. He is also a board member of the People for the American Way and a strong supporter of the animal rights group PETA. Mr. Baldwin lives in New York City, has 1 daughter, and is recently engaged. Mr. Baldwin can now add National Press Club luncheon speaker to that weighty list of accomplishments. Mr. Baldwin is also a well-known political activist. Perhaps that comes from spending some of his college years right here at George Washington University. Mr. Baldwin has been mentioned as a candidate for public office. This might be the right place to make that announcement. Mr. Baldwin?
Thank you very much to Teresa Warner and to everyone from the National Press Club and to all of you for having me here as your guest. And also to thank Bob Lynch and Nina Oslu and everyone on the staff of Americans for the Arts, because I am here once again as their guest for the Arts Advocacy Day work that's being done on Capitol Hill. And tonight is the lecture, the Nancy Hanks Lecture. And the dinner to follow. I started coming down, but before we get to that, actually, well, let's talk about American Airlines and Words with Friends, because I know that's precisely what you want to talk about. Because it's not lost on me that while I was being admonished for using my phone while we were parked at the gate. I think some dear friend of mine, some colleague of yours from Fox News, who I'm deeply, deeply, boundlessly admiring of, mentioned that I was using my phone while we were actually on the runway about to take off, and they had to taxi back, which is not true. But while I was in the plane and we were parked at the gate, I was using my phone, and then I was asked to leave the plane. It was, I want to just tell you this, it was this amazing moment, because it seemed like a scene from a really smart movie, like a Michael Mann movie, where you'd expect really smart writing and great acting, but not like some crazy, hyped up TV show. It was a really wonderful moment where I had said, I registered a very loud complaint about this woman who I thought had singled me out. And then a very young Asian American woman, who was actually this breathtakingly beautiful woman and very serene. I'm sitting on the plane, and she walked up to me and she said, "Mr. Baldwin, would you gather your things and come with me, please?" And I just had this kind of narcotic effect on me. I was like, she just spoke very quietly and very calmly, and they threw me off the plane. "Mr. Baldwin, would you kindly collect your things, please, and come with me?" And, but as all this is happening, there were probably about 7 or 8 people who had their cell phones out, and they were tweeting about it at the time it was happening. I want to thank all the people out there on Twitter who happened to make note of the fact that there were a lot of people in the first-class cabin of the plane who were on Twitter at that very moment that I was being kicked off for using my phone. They were tweeting about it, so not my day. Bad luck for me that day, but that's okay. I'm here as the guest of Americans for the Arts, and I've been coming down here since 1990. The origin of this work for me was with the Creative Coalition that was formed by Michael Fuchs, the former head of HBO. Fuchs, who wanted to bring together a bunch of entertainment industry professionals, producers, writers, directors, and actors to kind of focus their work and their advocacy on public policy. Comped for them their office space there at the HBO building across from Bryant Park back then. I think HBO is still there, but I don't think TCC is anymore. And Fuchs gave them office space and gave them a budget, a modest budget, a staff person from HBO. He got them started, and they went out and raised money. And the name of the game back then was for us to learn more about how to effectively advocate for our issue, whether it be in Albany or here in Washington. And Ron Silver, it's sad when I look at the photograph, and Nina can confirm this, there's a photograph of us together in one of our early trips. Steve Collins and I, Susan Sarandon, Chris, Michael Benahum, and Ron Silver. Half of the people in the photograph are gone. They passed away, very tragically. But Silver was someone who was a great mentor for me in the advocacy world. He remembers sitting me down on a train coming down here and talked very, very succinctly and very effectively about cover, and you're going to say this and they're going to say this, and anticipating their answer, and here's your battery of answers you're going to have, and facts and statements to help substantiate what we want to do. The issues were gun control, reproductive rights, the environment, federal funding for the arts, and so forth. And we would come down here, and I've come down here intermittently since then, to speak to members of Congress, to thank our supporters, both Republican and Democrat, in both the House and the Senate, who've worked to gain federal funding for the arts, and to not admonish, I mean, that's something I might have done 5 or 10 years ago now, but to, or shame, if you will. It's more to encourage and try to cajole some of our opponents who still don't believe that there's a role for the federal government in funding the arts. And I don't mean that in terms of individual grants. As many of you know, the NEA is out of the individual grant business as a result of some of the, I would imagine as a result of some of the controversies in the past. When I first started doing this kind of work, it was the days of Karen Finley and Serrano and Piss Christ and Mapplethorpe, and a lot of people jumping up and down and screaming during the early Clinton years, and we wound up getting an appropriation in '94, I guess, when Gingrich and that crowd took over, and what my dear friend Liz Robbins helped us to term what they called the corn for porn swap. Some deal was made with conservative Republicans in the House to get some kind of an agricultural subsidy, which now allowed them to back off and support federal funding of the arts at a certain price. And that backroom deal between the NEA and the agriculture subsidy became known as the corn for porn swap in the days of Mapplethorpe. Since then, a tremendous amount has changed on a variety of levels. The government is out of the individual grant business. The amount of money dropped precipitously for a while and has come back up. However, I think the numbers are still problematic as far as I'm concerned. You have a appropriation for the NEA now at about $147 million. The appropriation, when I first started coming down here, the statistics I had available online were for 1992, which was $175 million. The internet, which never ceases to amaze me, took me quickly to a site where you could do the index to adjust for inflation, so I programmed at $175 million, which today would be, I think it's $248 or $238 million. So if 175 million in '92 would actually be 248 million today, and we're at 147 million, we're just around between 90 and 100 million dollars less. Make no mistake, we are right now about 90 to 100 million dollars less in actual federal subsidies for the arts in a country that has grown to 320 million people, roughly, let's say. At least the ones we can count these days. At least the ones we bother counting in this country these days. And I'm someone who's said on the record that I think that the arts are beyond essential. I mean, everywhere I go, I just got back from Rome, and everywhere I go, I see that dichotomy. I see that strange dissonance between some European economies. You go to Greece, of course, and the Italians are very uncomfortable about their economy right now. And you go there and you see that we have what they don't have. The American economy is still a strong economy when we balance our debts and pay our bills. The American economy is still a great economy and still a strong economy. When we falter, it's because we don't get it right in terms of balancing our budgets and our priorities, and that's a different conversation. But you go to Italy, and they have a weak economy, but they have an artistic heritage that puts us to shame. You go to Paris, you go to London, even when you're in New York, and this city as well. I mean, tonight when I give these remarks, I talk about the artistic heritage of this country being embodied in this city like no other city in this country. Included in the remarks I make today, I say that nothing makes you love this country more. This kind of chokes me up, actually. Nothing makes you love this country more than when you come to Washington. And it has nothing to do with the rhetoric of any one of these people who exists on the Hill today, none of them, Republican or Democrat. The rhetoric of political leadership in this country is irrelevant in terms of creating real love for this country. It only creates disgust and disdain and disappointment and heartbreak. And if you walk around Washington, D.C., the great, great architectural, the great, great artistic heritage of our country is embodied in this town, in this great, great, great city where I went to college for 3 years. In my comments today, I say that. I say, God, it's so funny that I live in New York, you know? And years ago, I used to live in Washington, and I'd go to New York, and here I was in Washington, took the course about D.C. politics and culture, learned Kennedy's great line about D.C., the city of southern efficiency and northern hospitality. JFK's great quote about Washington, and I remember that I lived in the old D.C. 1976 I came down here, back when they were burning the Shah of Iran in effigy in Lafayette Park. They were burning the Shah of Iran in effigy. Now if you lit a match in Lafayette Park, you'd get shot by probably 6 or 7 different snipers in different aspects all over that area in front of the White House. They shut down Pennsylvania Avenue since I was here. But I remember it was odd to me to be in Union Station. I remember when I went to school here, I didn't have the money to fly, and It wasn't convenient, and they used to have a train you could take. The last train out of Union Station to Penn Station was at 9:30, and it was a local. It stopped in Delaware, it stopped in New Jersey. You'd swear to God it was stopping in St. Louis, too, it took so long. This damn train was the slowest damn train you've ever been on in your entire lifetime. And we go to New York. It was like $18. It was $36 round trip to go on this train. And you'd leave Union Station, and sometimes I'd get a ride there or whatever. I wanted to get there early. If I missed that train, I was dead. And I'd get there early, and you'd sit in Union Station, the great, great, great Union Station in Washington, D.C., then go on from there to New York, sophisticated, glamorous, wealthy, cosmopolitan New York, and go to that godforsaken sinkhole Penn Station. You go from one of the great train stations in this country to probably the worst train station in this country. To the worst. That is, what was erected on the grounds of what had once been a great train station, as many people here know. The old Mead, why am I blanking on that? McKim, Mead and White. McKim, Mead and White. That's a tongue twister for you, thank you. The old McKim, Mead and White structure, the old Penn Station torn down. Controversy around the world, from all corners of the world, which gives birth to the historical preservation law in New York. But you're in New York. There's a lot of great architecture in New York, not like Washington. There's a lot of great architecture and art in New York. Much of the art, of course, that's not in public spaces and architecture behind a door that you've got to pay a fee to access. You know, great art in London, Spain, all over Europe. Rome is singular to me. I just got back from Rome. It's hard to leave Rome because the city itself is a work of art. You were inside a work of art that is the expanse of an entire city. You know, and I think that in this country, when you're over there, you see they've got the. I only have glib words for you today, about this, but they have the art thing down. They're spending a lot of money over there, and they're getting a lot of tourists over there. They're getting a lot of our money over there over the last many years because they have preserved that heritage and they've made art count. They've raised their children to believe that art counts. It's part of their culture and part of their heritage. And you come on over here and we have what they don't have. We have the potential, and typically we have a great humming, hissing, steaming 12-cylinder economy here, and we don't get the art thing right all the time. Because I think we send the wrong signal here. We say that art isn't important enough for the government to spend money on. You don't need to spend what I would spend on it. I'd spend $1 billion each on the NEA and the NEH. I'd spend a lot of money on art. I'd spend a lot more money than most people would possibly imagine on art, government money, on the arts education and so forth. But I think my host here this year, Bob Lynch, said he would settle for $1 per U.S. citizen he'd be happy with. Bob said, just ask them to wrap their brains around $1, $320 million would be in it, which would still be more than double what the appropriation is now. I want to finish by just, because I could go on and on and on. I do want to finish by just saying that we have heroes, friends, comrades, whatever you want to call them here in the House and the Senate, both Republican and Democrat, in terms of our seemingly never-ending journey in keeping America focused on the arts and arts education. I would like to take a moment to thank Louise Slaughter, the Democrat from New York in the Rochester-Buffalo area. You all know Louise Slaughter. And Congressman Norm Dix, who's the Democrat from Washington in the Tacoma area, both stalwarts in the Democratic side of the House for the arts. On the Republican side, equally a stalwart. I was here last year when Kevin Spacey was the Nancy Hanks speaker, and I came to testify with Kevin before the Congress, and the testimony was canceled. And we didn't wind up doing that, but Representative Richard Hanna, who's been a good friend to the arts in our movement, the Republican from the Utica area of New York, and Representative Chris Gibson, also from New York, from central New York in the Saratoga Springs area. These are, those are two, what we would call freshman moderates. Oh, no, I'm sorry, did I have yes, Hannah from Utica and Gibson from Saratoga Springs, two those are two moderate freshmen who are with us. The two stalwarts we have of Republicans in the House are, of course, Mike Simpson, who I met with last year from the Boise area of Idaho, and Representative Aaron Schock from the Peoria, Illinois district of his in Illinois. Both Simpson and Schock have been long-time friends of ours. People who are not, as we say in New York, the mishpuchen in our movement here, are the Republican Study Group, which I think you had mentioned to me, Nina, who was the founder of the Republican? Phil Crane, the former member, Phil Crane, was the founder of the Republican Study Group, who they want all federal funding zeroed out. And Congressman Tim Walberg, the Republican from Michigan, we're hoping somehow I'll be able to get, well, a game of words with friends going with Tim Walberg. I'd like to try to maybe pitch that. We're going to find some beachhead there with him and try to get him over on our side. On the Senate side, we have Senator Tom Udall from New Mexico, who has always been is good with us on this issue. He's a first-term senator, but he has been spearheading efforts to recruit other senators to support funding increases for the NEA. And Tom Harkin, who was chairman of the HELP Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, is been placing a spotlight on the decline in arts education programs in grades K through 12. The Republicans we have that are our heroes and our friends are Tom Cochran, the Republican from Mississippi. I met with him last year. He's been great for us on the arts. And Susan Collins from Maine, a longtime moderate Republican and supporter of public funding for the arts. And Tom Coburn is the one we were going to mention today as being not as wonderful as we would like him to be on the issue of the arts. And I wanted to mention that we have a couple of, is this the one for Coburn's right here? Is that the Coburn? This is the Oklahoma. We have a list here of, yeah, it's all Oklahoma, yeah. In the state of Oklahoma, we've got, you know, in March of 2001, the Oklahoma Visual Arts Coalition received a grant of $15,000. In March of that was in March of 2001. In May of 2001, the Lyric Theater of Oklahoma in Oklahoma City, all 5 of these grantees are in Oklahoma City, by the way, received, 2011 rather, yeah. Oklahoma Visual Arts Coalition was March of 2011. In May of 2011 was Lyric Theater of Oklahoma. They got $45,000. The Oklahoma Council of the Arts, which I guess is more of an umbrella organization in that community, in June of 2011 got $773,000 from the National Endowment for the Arts in Oklahoma. In July of 2011, the Oklahoma Visual Arts again got $25,000, and then the Oklahoma Historical Society in July got $20,000. So I just want to mention that we always find it not enjoyable, but ultimately necessary to point out to some of these folks that there are constituents of theirs in their own congressional districts or statewide in the Senate who the NEA is bringing some wonderful, wonderful arts-related programming and events, shows, what have you, and educational opportunities to young people there under the umbrella of the National Endowment for the Arts. I want to finish by saying that in my own life, my path with art, I mean, sometimes people think that when you do what I do for a living, you kind of live in the art lounge. You know, you're in the art tent, and you know, you're behind the velvet rope with the art people, and that's not necessarily true. I work in a business where the longer I'm in the business, the purely artistic aspects of my business intrigue me much more than the glitz and the glamour and the what is very often the purview of the stars and the actors. Design, directing, cinematography, editing, musical composition, everything that comes into play in great filmmaking are far more interesting to me now and draw my attention now than they do. And but the artistic experience in my life comes to me the same way it comes to you. I go out my door and I try to identify some experience artistically that is attractive to me, then I got to go get a ticket for it, and I got to buy a ticket for it. And I can afford to buy a ticket for it. I can go see whatever I want, whenever I want. I mean, I've been very blessed that way, but a lot of people can't. And I've been working my foundation that I set up a few years ago to funnel, some tributaries of my own income to the arts and funding. Right now, I made this agreement with Capital One Bank. I had this relationship with Capital One Bank. Becoming a spokesperson for a bank at the time of the banking collapse, and at the genesis moment of the Occupy Wall Street movement was not a goal of mine in my career. I want to assure you of that. However, Capital One came to me along with a couple of other bankers, and we're talking about on-camera promotional opportunities, which I decided to avail myself of for two reasons. One, I was on a television show every week, so I thought, now's the time. You know, when I'm off TV, I'm going to be off TV for a while. But while I'm on TV every week, and then once we went into syndication, it became clearer that audiences are probably plenty sick of me now, so they can't get any sicker of me. Maybe I'm wrong about that, by the way. That they can't get any sicker of me than they are now. So I thought, well, I'll do this campaign for them, and I funneled all of the proceeds I've gotten from them toward arts funding. My foundation, we earned a specific amount of money from a two-tier contract with them last year for 18 months, and gave all that money to arts-related organizations, and I'm doing another round with them now. And I only mention that because it might not have been the smartest move in my life to go do a commercial for a bank, but they've been great partners with me. They've helped me to shape the content of the commercials, and they've been they've just been wonderful, wonderful partners for me, and they really helped me to publicize and promote the fact that we're giving the money to arts-related organizations. And I say this because what I've discovered as I've gotten older, because I am older now, I just turned 54, and as I've gotten older, there's a thing that I did that satisfied me, and there's a thing I did with my life, and what's coming more into focus are, not a lot of them, but the 3 or 4 other things in my life I might have done that I could have been very happy doing that were not at all what I'm doing now. I got a great opportunity to be the on-air announcer for the New York Philharmonic in New York, and I've been doing that for the last 3 seasons with them, and my relationship with them has led me to this place of when you're with them, you are in the art lounge, you know. When you're hanging out with these people who are like, you know, Alan Gilbert and Zarin Mehta, and when you're in a bunch of people, when you're in a room with a bunch of people who have Maestro Charles Dutoit there from the Philadelphia Symphony, and they're calling him Charlie. You know, you're in with a pretty heady crowd, and when I'm around these people in the art world, in the performing art world, the classically trained music group of opera and so forth, it's been so thrilling for me. I mean, God, you just don't know how amazing it is to me. And this is the thing I'll close with. What it's also opened a vista for me is in arts administration. Mehta, who is resigning now or retiring as the executive director, he and his wife Carmen have become very dear friends of mine, and Mehta's leaving after 12 years running the New York Philharmonic, and Daniel Van Biezen is taking over for him. He came up from Australia, lovely guy. And I've been with Mehta, and I realized that to raise the money, the staff of the Philharmonic, you know, when that group of men and women go out on that stage and they perform that music, and that building lifts off the ground, for that hour and a half, for that 2 hours, you feel like that life is really worth living when those people are playing this beautiful music. And the tens and thousands, hundreds of thousands of hours those people put into mastering those instruments and studying the classical repertoire, and they give you this beautiful, beautiful art form. Well, there's a lot of people in the other part of that building that got to make that happen. They have to raise that money, they have to promote that and sell those tickets and coordinate these schedules. Arts administration or something. I'd like to see more programs in arts administration that are funded by the federal government in terms of arts education. Because not everybody, what is it, like 1% of everybody that picks up a violin gets a seat in a really, really esteemed orchestra. The other 99% teach or play something that is not, for the Boston or the Cleveland or, the Big Five, if you will, or for the San Francisco or in Utah or Dallas, or all these other great symphonies, that they don't get there. So for many people, just as I have realized that there are ancillary jobs There are other parts of my own field that I might have worked in and been just as happy. I see that now at my age. I realize that's true in the classical music world as well, as one example, that there are other things I could have done. I mean, there's times I sit there at the Philharmonic and I think, God, I'd trade places with Zarin Mehta for a year any day. Give me a year knowing what he knows and doing what he does and being able to exist the way he exists with these great, great, great artists. It's really, really thrilling. I think that pretty much encapsulates what my mission today is my mission is to try to remind people that art is many, many things. We all have our own opinions of what art is and what we define as art, but the one thing I hope we can all agree on, or maybe one day I can convince us all to agree on, is that art is essential. Art is essential for us to continue to be a great country. We have to make art essential in our own lives and in the lives of our children. Thank you.
Is there one area of the arts that is most threatened by lack of funding?
Well, I'd like to say half-hour comedy on NBC on Thursday night is the answer to that question. That's a very threatened. So they tell me, but I would say that. I mean, it's hard. That's a tough question for me to answer because I've never done or even read about a survey of what the X-ray of the art world is and what the CAT scans of the art world will tell us right now. But I do know that I think they're all suffering equally. I've got friends of mine who, Monica, who works with my company. I mean, people who work with me in my life, what I do, all say the same thing whenever they leave this job and I do this AirSats exit interview. I say, what was the job like for you? And they say, working for you is more like working for a congressman than it is an actor. There's so little glamour and film festivals and film openings. It's more like going and raising money for people. The request for me to raise money for people in the arts and for their organizations is equal across the board. If it's not Jacques d'Amboise and the National Dance Institute, it's this museum, it's this gallery, it's this poetry reading, it's this. I mean, it's across the board, and I think that of all of them, and the theater, the not-for-profit theater, whether it's the Public or the Roundabout or Lynn Meadow and MTC in New York, all of these great institutions are struggling very hard to beef up. When times are strong, what do they want to do? What does an organization, a great arts institution, want to do when everything starts to get on the uptick? Well, they want the money for their reserve. They want to pump up that reserve. They want to get another $50 million in that reserve because they're going to dip into that reserve on a rainy day. And I guess the people in my life, I will cross a line here to include literature in terms of art. My friends who I think are complaining the loudest, who seem the most despondent, most genuinely despondent, are people in the world of publishing. Because books are just all going online, and books are, the whole book world seems to be kind of melting down.
Do you think that lawmakers would be more generous in funding the arts if money was designated for education and not arts projects or organizations?
I don't know. I think that they got rid of the individual grants, and I think that was a mistake. I mean, to me, that spoke to freedom of expression. As I said before, they wanted people. They set up a mechanism for a while where if you were given a grant and it was proven to be obscene, if you were taken to court in your local jurisdiction, in your municipality, and obscenity laws were violated with NEA money, you had to pay the grant money back. And I thought that struck me as odd, because I mean, I don't want the government to fund obscene art, but number one, the number of things that were proven to be obscene that were funded by the NEA, I can't really think of any, actually. There were zero that were proven in court, that a judge ruled that they had broken an obscenity law, and where that was implied, it was such a minuscule amount. And I thought an idea that the government wants to fund, or certain aspects of the government want to fund a type of work, but preemptively hamstring that in some way, where they want to say to the artist, we're going to give you some money to do a project, But make sure when you do this project now, you've given us a general idea what it is. If it's obscene now, if you do anything obscene, you're going to have to give us the money back. You have to pay us back the money. And I thought, well, are we going to do that in all aspects of the government? Are opponents of the NEA going to go to the Justice Department and say, now you're going to do this prosecution, and if you don't get a conviction, you're going to give us your salaries back for those hours? We can get insane here with this whole kind of preemptive safeguarding they want to do. These are freedom of expression issues. And what's happened, and I don't like this word culture war because it's such a hot-button word, but in these last many years, what we've done is we've allowed people to really, really cave on the issue of freedom of expression in the arts. We've really allowed people to get so intimidated about freedom of expression and what it means and what it can lead to that a lot of people have backed off in defending that concept.
How do you defend the need for funding the arts alongside the need for funding jobs and education as well as local aid?
Well, Teresa, I'm so glad you brought that up. Because as most people who are advocates of this know and have known for many, many years, that arts spending is a stimulus for economic development in the areas where that money flows. Whether you're in a place that's as well-heeled as Manhattan, where you've got a lot of corporations there and rich people who are giving millions upon millions of dollars to the Lincoln Centers of the world and the Metropolitan Museums of Art and MoMA and so forth, and all kinds of arts, performing arts and visual arts institutions, that private giving is enormous. That private giving is incalculable. But those institutions get federal money as well. They qualify for federal money because tourists are coming to those cities and spending a lot of money on parking and restaurants and hotels. Arts spending stimulates economic activity. I went down at the request of the AT&T Performing Arts Center in Dallas, the Dallas Performing Arts Center. They asked me to come down there and do one of these conversations with programs. I went down there about a month or two ago. And I was down there, and they were telling me how, if I understood the woman correctly, some board member backstage, she said to me that they had feared, I don't mean to be cute about this, but American Airlines, back to them for a moment, they're headquartered in Chicago, right? They're hubbed in Chicago currently, I think? Yeah, they're in Chicago. And that the people in Dallas believed that one of the reasons they lost out in the consideration of having a major corporate hub like that come to Dallas, even though they have plenty of other ones down there, was because they didn't have a concentrated arts center, a distinctive, monolithic arts center. Like you have in New York's Lincoln Center. And they're doing something about that now. They showed me these plans they have where right in that corridor there where the Wind Spear is and the Opera House is and the Performing Arts School that Edie Brickell graduated from, and they named all their famous graduates. They told me that they're going to close down some enormous section of some 8-lane freeway they have there and rip it up and build a garden and unify this entire structure into their own Lincoln Center. Billions of dollars, Lincoln Center type of facility, billions of dollars they intend to spend over the next couple of decades, and certainly they have the money down there, I would imagine. But it was interesting to me how the arts is business. The arts is business. I mean, where federal funding for the arts goes, it is a proven, incontrovertible trigger for a lot of other economic activity in the area where those funds are sent.
How has Twitter changed your life as a celebrity, and does personal interaction with the fans have real value?
I'd like to answer that question on Twitter, if I may. I had an interview. What was the woman's name? Do we know? Is she here today? There was a woman who I did an interview with. Is she here today from Newsweek? Who was we? I had a reporter. There she is. There we are. What is your name again? Sandra McElwain from Newsweek. I spoke to her, and I think I was a little rough with Sandra today. Because she was asking me the same question about Twitter, and I said, well, Sandra, the great thing about Twitter is it enables me to bypass people like you. What could be better than that? I mean, I can speak to my fans directly and instantaneously. Granted, it's in 140 characters. Granted, the primary issue is that I'm not a good writer, actually, but Twitter Twitter for me is a work in progress. But I do like that it enables you to communicate on a limited number of fields with your fans. You use Twitter for promotion. Use Twitter to hug your colleagues and fellows in a certain area. Use Twitter to kick and elbow your opponents politically or what have you. It's pretty childish sometimes. I mean, I'm guilty of that too. But it's something I'm evolving. But I do enjoy it because you get to speak to people directly and bypass all of you in this room.
Well, since I have you for a few more minutes, I'm going to ask you a few more questions. You said if every entertainment show went off the air tomorrow, what difference would it make? Every talk show, political show, sitcoms for that matter. Media in the U.S. is dull. What would you like to see on TV?
Well, I think it's less about what would I like to see on TV, because that doesn't really matter. I think what we're going to start seeing on TV is much more of the pure pay-per-view packaging of television. You're going to start to see all of it. I mean, a lot of people in the world are saying, I'm paying for a cable package that I don't want. You know, you're making me pay $69, $89, $125 a month to have a triple package bundle of my internet streaming and my phone and my cable. And I mean, I suppose if you have more economic resources, you don't read that bill as carefully as you might. And for other people who do, they read that bill a little bit carefully, and more of those people are saying, "What am I paying for? You know, I'm paying for." It's that old line from that song, 500 channels and there's nothing on. You know, and it's not that there's nothing on. It's what you want. So I think we're getting much closer now to the age of the a la carte television viewing, where you're going to go to a site, and you're going to, whether it's an Apple TV style thing, and you're going to select your menu of what channels you want. And you're going to be charged a la carte for each of those things. And that, I think, is going to really profoundly change the television business.
You were upset with the Today Show for camping outside your door. Would you really have given them an interview if they had called? Or tweeted, too, maybe.
Well, I mean, I think that that's something that obviously has changed in my lifetime. I remember I would watch some morning programming before I became purely a radio person in the morning and listening to NPR and so forth. And I would watch morning programming a la Good Morning America and the Today Show and CBS. I was a good Harry Smith fan. I loved Harry, and I would watch these shows. And then one time, I remember toward the end of her tenure, it was, I think, a special Halloween episode of the Today Show. Katie Couric came down, and she was dressed in a kind of a Marilyn Monroe getup, a kind of a revealing dress and a blonde wig, and she and the staff of the show and her hosts did a musical rendition of "Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend." I mean, literally, Katie Couric came down a staircase with jewels on, and Matt Lauer was holding her hand, and she was lip-syncing "Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend." That was the day I turned off the Today Show, and I never watched it again. Never watched it again. It was over. And I just didn't need to see people doing lip syncs of "Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend" at 7:30 in the morning. But I think that those shows, they struggle in that infotainment way of having to, battle with each other for audience. And from my standpoint, and I don't want to belabor this, I just that obsession, that interest in the personal lives of people in my business is, to a degree, I think is strange. I mean, when you are on the inside of that, it is just kind of odd why people, I mean, some of it I can see if someone's ill or someone gets married or someone has, some more kind of, benchmarks in their life. But what I realized was, and I'll finish with this, is that what's happened in this business was many years ago, and Todd, forgive me if I've already said this in front of you when we met recently, is that many years ago you had the Hedda Hoppers and the Luella Parsons, and you had people who were trying to get scoops on the stars, and they wanted to know about who was having an affair and who was pregnant and had an abortion, and who is sick and dying, and who's gay, who's a closet homosexual. And the studios had an obligation, and the studios had a vested interest in managing the flow of that information and controlling the flow of that information. And they did so largely, at least compared to now, very effectively. Until one day, one guy woke up and said, "Why are we killing ourselves protecting these idiots? These fornicating, drug-addled," you can just see the level of cynicism of the studio heads. And so they sat there and they said, "Why don't we go the other way completely and make some money off this?" So when I go to work at a movie studio, When I go to work at a major company, I go to work at a movie studio and shoot a film for them, and down the hall is a television program owned by the same company that's trying to cut my throat on TV. That's a very, very new world we live in these last 20 years with these entertainment programs. I sign a contract with a major studio and I've got to go to work. And on that contract, we have a writer that is a very lengthy writer of all the press we're obligated to do to promote the film, and it's a contractual requirement. And sidestepping some of these people who are just out to, you know, to trip you, or if you trip yourself more likely, and just to mock you. You know, it's mockery. We live in this world of mockery now, and reality shows and people wanting to laugh at other people, and there's a kind of a Roman circus to the whole thing. But I think that for me, I guess in the case of the Today Show, I guess I just expected more from them.
You don't think that something that required legal action on your behalf was newsworthy?
I think it's newsworthy, but the problem is, I mean, in my particular case with that story, which all of the facts of that will be laid bare soon, because the woman who was the focus of this, who was stalking me, she's going to go to court, I guess, as I'm told, in May. I was asked by the DA's office, they said, could you do us a favor? And they were really gentlemen about it. It was two men I spoke to. They said, could you do us a favor, not talk about this in the press, because we've got an ongoing case, we've got an ongoing trial. And I said, okay. I mean, I kept my comments to a minimum, and when I say to you they're going to have this case is going to come before a judge, and I have been fortunate enough, I will say that I have a I don't know how to describe it. I have a tsunami, if you will, of emails and telephone messages and things from this individual who was the friend of a friend of mine. This is someone who I met through someone else, and met with this person at the request of my friend. My friend said, I want you to do me a favor and meet this person to discuss X, and met this person. And in the ensuing 2 years since that meeting, something else evolved. And so, but I have a complete deluge of evidentiary material that I've given to the DA that discusses, you know, what I put up with. And you can see in this line as it goes, it takes some pretty hair-raising turns. So,
are you leaving 30 Rock?
well, you know, it's funny. I know in the sense that the show, we all signed for 6 years, and I did sign a contract extension for a 7th season, because right as I was really sick of it, like for everybody who did, for all of us who did the show, we all had the feeling that it was, we were on to something in season 1, and seasons 2, 3, and 4 were great. We got all these prizes and all these awards, and the ratings have never been great, but our online ratings keep us there. What they call the +7 rating is always very strong for us, DVR and Hulu and so forth. Millions and millions of people watched the show in the ensuing 7 days after the show online. We're the beneficiaries of that technology. But then we got to season 5, and season 5 really didn't feel great. Everybody felt pretty crappy after season 5. We thought maybe we'd run out of gas. And when they came to about doing a 7th season, I guess because of their syndication edicts and so forth, I said, hell no. I was like, please, I want a meteor to hit this building right now and put us all out of our misery, because this is just, I can't do this another day and say these things again. And then we got through with season 5 and got into season 6, the season we're in now. And the writing is often the case with great writers. And I say this without an ounce of politeness or kindness. They are the greatest sitcom writers on television for the last, you know, since the Seinfeld era. This is it. A lot of sitcom programming is more cute than funny. You know, and there's a whole network who will remain nameless, who their monolithic sitcom lineup is just one frat boy sex joke after another, which works. It's popular. They're printing money over there. But the 30 Rock writers are the smartest, best comedy writers on television, bar none, in the last 7 years. And so, of course, they took this dip and came back in this season 6, and everybody loved the writing, and we all agreed we would do it for a couple more years. I would have done it next year and the year after that. But the truth of the matter is that the NBC is in its predicament, and they need to probably scrape all the paint off the building now and start all over again, because they've got their pride. The Roberts family and the Comcast people who've taken over, they're like anybody else in media. They're competitive and they want to win, and they don't want NBC to stay in this predicament. Because I'll just finish this by saying that, and I mentioned this to someone else, you know, working for NBC was not insignificant in my decision. I did not know Tina that well before the show began. I'd met her on Saturday Night Live, but had very little to do with her because she was the head writer and you didn't interact with her one-on-one that way. And Lorne was the person that rang the doorbell for me to come and do the television series with Tina. And Lorne is an old friend of mine, and that got that going. But the decision was also a part of, or a silver lining, was to work for NBC, which I think is the greatest of the three networks in the long term when you look at the stock, so to speak, of the company. Some of the other networks have had great legacies in news and sports and one-hour drama and half-hour, but none that compares with NBC. NBC to me really is the greatest network. Their Olympics coverage, their heritage in news was to me equal with, or their legacy rather, is equal to CBS's. And their comedy lineup was king for a long, long time with Friends and Seinfeld. But they've hit this tough place now, and I think everybody who works there, we'd like to see them get out of it. I'd like to see NBC get out of the predicament they're in, ratings-wise. Unfortunately, to do so, it probably means they're probably going to have to cancel most of the shows they have on the air now.
Do you still fly American Airlines?
Next question.
I'll look for the tweet on that one. You were a student at George Washington University and ran for Student Association president. What did you learn from that experience?
Well, I lost, so I learned to, when you draw the posters, draw more neatly. The graphic design is a key component of electoral politics. I was in school, and I went to school here and was an intern on the Hill for Jerry Ambrose, who was the congressman back then from the 3rd Congressional District on Long Island, where I'm from. And Jerry Ambrose, I didn't get to see him very much because the interns that were there, we worked 8 hours, 12 hours a week maybe, and we'd go in there. And most of these guys were all, of the interns I worked with, they were all just mythical alcoholics in training, these guys. They were just, every day they would have the roster there of all the parties that were in all the House and Senate office buildings. And I came in and I was like Gomer Pyle. I was like, so what do y'all do when we're done with work now? We licked all the envelopes and we sorted all the files and everything. And what y'all want to do after work? And they have a list of all the National Association of Carpet Shampooers is meeting at the National Association of Q-tip weavers is meeting. And they'd have all these organizations meeting, and these guys I worked with, they knew the skinny on all of them in terms of food and booze. They'd say, remember that reception we went with the Q-tip people, that they had great food? They had lobster there at the thing. And I'm sitting there going, well, I guess we best go over and, say howdy to the Q-tip people. And, I would go, and these guys, all they wanted to do was party. And we did a bit of that, but I also had a guy say to me, do you want to work on a project other than opening constituent mail, which this is before the internet, obviously. This is 77, I think I did this, 78. And the guy said to me, he said, what do you want? He goes, I got a project for you. He says, No Greater Love, the organization that honors returning Vietnam veterans. If you remember No Greater Love back then. You're nodding, I think. He's nodding. Jerry Ambrose, he nodded. No Greater Love. Thank you. Jerry Ambrose, they said, the guy who worked for Jerry said, we're going to put you in charge. They said, No Greater Love wants each of the 435 members of Congress to select the most well-reacclimated Vietnam veteran. You're going to go into the district, we're going to take submissions, you're going to call pastors and priests, and so we're going to call all these community leaders, and we're going to contact them and ask them for submissions. So I go off and I do this project for a couple of weeks, and I come in and I go, I've got my my report for you. And the guy who was the young staffer says, well, come on in, we're going to have a meeting with the congressman. I think I met him like hello, goodbye, like twice. He was never there paying attention to me. I was in an envelope, licking envelopes. I was in a room, rather. And they bring me in, they go, Congressman, you know Mr. Baldwin, Alec Baldwin? And I was like, yes, sir. And he says, so what did you come up with? Who is the person? I said, Ron Kovic, who was the subject of Born on the 4th of July. The guy who Stone made the movie about, this big anti-war film, and this is, working class, kind of boilerplate, Long Island. And there's a long pause, and Ambrose goes, are you out of your mind? and shuts down my whole program. He's like, we're going to get, Baldwin, you're off the case now. We'll get someone else to take care of this. But I loved Washington, worked at the FCC and worked at a law firm and worked for Jerry Ambrose and all this other stuff. But I was given the opportunity to audition for, and I got into the acting program. And to be honest with you, I started working right away, and I never looked back. So that's what I wound up doing.
Is it true that when you turned 40, you stopped wearing jeans? And if this event had been held after 6 o'clock, would you have worn a tuxedo?
I might have. I don't see anything wrong with that. Someone asked me earlier, have you become more like your character? And I'm like, well, yeah, when you do a show, that is one thing. When you do wear you're in Washington, this is a suit and tie crowd. And I'm in New York, and that's pretty much a suit and tie crowd. I used to spend a lot more time in LA, which is not a suit and tie crowd as a rule, and they're proudly so. But I play a guy that's in a suit and tie every day, and it does wear off on you. I do walk around. I do get a little bit of this kind of Thurston Howell attitude. Thank you for those who remember that reference. Thank you. Are you nodding? Thank you. This guy's he was my roommate in college. I do have a little bit of I'll see someone, I'll be like, you can't wear that. You can't wear brown shoes with a gray suit, my good man. What on earth are you thinking? So that the sartorial rigidity of my character has worn off on me. But your other question was about jeans. No, I don't wear jeans. I don't wear jeans. I don't, and I don't want to say why I don't wear jeans, because that would be to offend all of the men in this room who do wear jeans when you're over 40. So.
You can tell me afterwards.
I'll tell you.
Okay, great. What person in history would you most like to portray?
Who would I most like to portray? Oh, that's a great question. Who would I like to portray? I don't know if I want to portray him, because I don't really think about that way. I'd like to see this person portrayed in some way, and I don't know how you could dramatize. I mean, sometimes these things are the purview of literature for a reason, and they don't really make great films. But as we live in the world we live in today, and we live in a world that I think is increasingly shaped, I don't want to say recklessly, but I should say the word is, God, I'm struggling. You're all writers, help me out here. A world that is being shaped kind of surreptitiously, if you will, by the current Supreme Court. I would like to see something that would bring to a new generation of people a biography, film or otherwise, of the life of William O. Douglas.
Do you plan to run for public office?
I have a very important announcement I would like to make to all of you today. I'm glad you're all here. It is with great humility and a sense of pride and a great love of my country that I announced that I am running for the East Hampton Library Historical Society Treasurer's position. And I would hope all of you will read my literature. I'm going to have a table with some literature outside when we're there. Thank you.
We're almost out of time, but before I get to ask the last question, I would like to remind you of some upcoming luncheon speakers. On April 24th, we have Secretary Ken Salazar, the U.S. Department of Interior. May 4th, Mike Rizzo, General Manager of the Washington Nationals. And on May 9th, Billie Jean King, the tennis legend. Next, I would like to present our guest with the traditional NPC coffee mug. And my last question for you. What is in your wallet?
I'll give you an insight into my wallet. When I did make the deal with Capital One, they insisted, obviously, that I had to carry Capital One credit cards and destroy all my other credit cards. I had to be a customer there, so I do have Capital One credit cards. And another thing I save is my daughter, when she was a little child, she made me for herself and I. She made us both licensed veterinarians in the state of California. So I have drawn with her by hand when she was 5 years old my license as a veterinarian in the state of California. That and my Capital One cards.
Do you practice?
Yes, my daughter.
How about a round of applause for our speaker today? Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thanks.
I'd also like to thank the National Press Club staff, including its Journalism Institute and Broadcast Center, for organizing today's event. Finally, here's a reminder that you can find more information about the National Press Club on our website. Also, if you'd like to get a copy of today's program, please check out our website at www.press.org. Thank you all for coming, and we're adjourned.